Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is focused on the larger world and foremost the victims of that devastating earthquake in Morocco. We're all waiting to hear from President Biden in Vietnam, his last stop on a whirlwind international trip aimed at strengthening global alliances at a time of high anxiety. The president is going to give a news conference at any moment, and we will bring that to you live. He will surely be asked about his goals at this weekend's G20 summit, which focused on countering China, its splintering economy, and its aggressive posture around the globe, and on Russia's grinding war against the Ukrainian people amid dwindling hopes of a resolution anytime soon. Ukraine is reacting today with frustration to a joint statement from the G20 nations, which include Russia and China, a statement that did not directly condemn Russia's war. A spokesman for the government of Ukraine said that the statement ignored reality and called its written text about the war, quote, nothing to be proud of. Let's get straight to Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley for her response to President Biden's trip. She's also the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Haley, thanks so much for joining us. Last year's G20 statement, as you know, explicitly condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine, though, of course, Russia did not sign off on that part of the statement. This year, the final statement stopped short of any direct condemnation of the invasion. What is your reaction? What do you think is more important, unanimity or an explicit condemnation?
It was a win for Russia and China. They're celebrating today. I mean, what we should have had was Biden should have really pushed hard to acknowledge what he acknowledged a year ago, that Russia invaded a pro-American, freedom-loving country. And that's a fact. And to deny a fact a year later is giving a win to Russia, and China is gloating because they're looking at Taiwan as this is happening, and it's a shame.
Some House Republicans, as you know, are fighting to strip $24 billion in aid to Ukraine out of the upcoming government spending bill. Do you think that would be a mistake?
I think that you have to look at the fact that 3.5% has been spent from our defense budget towards Ukraine. That's just 3.5%. That percentage of GDP, 11 European countries have spent more than us. We know that Russia has said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next, and then you're looking at a full-on war. What we're trying to do is prevent war. That's a pretty good return on investment to prevent war. So I think that we need to continue giving them equipment and ammunition with our allies to win. I don't think we need to give them straight up cash. I don't think we need to put troops on the ground. But we need to finish this because we have to always remember a win for Russia is a win for China. They've made that very clear. And right now, China is our #1 national security threat.
So House Republicans should keep that Ukraine spending in the spending bill and should not separate it and should support it.
Republicans and Democrats should not pull in Afghanistan. Don't go pulling out now. Putin is at rock bottom. We know that because he's getting drones from Iran and missiles from North Korea. We know that because they've raised the draft age in Russia to 65. Finish this. Biden has missed multiple opportunities to finish this. We need to make sure that we end this war quickly, that we finish it, but we do it the right way. We don't want a further war, and the only way we can do that is to have Ukraine win. And there's no one that wants the Ukrainians to win more than the Taiwanese, because they know that if Ukraine wins, China will stay away from Taiwan. And so, yes, I think Republicans and Democrats need to keep their eye on the ball, and that is, let's finish this mission in Ukraine, and then we will handle Russia and China by just doing that.
Your fellow candidates, Chris Christie and Mike Pence, have traveled to Ukraine this year. Are you planning on traveling to Ukraine?
I plan on traveling to Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and the rest of the country. I don't have time to go to another country right now. I'm trying to earn the support of many Americans. A
special United Nations commission looking into human rights violations in Ukraine recently said that it had, quote, not reached a conclusion whether there's genocide in Ukraine. You were the UN ambassador. Is that finding acceptable to you? Do you think Russia is committing genocide in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, it's hard to believe anything the UN says. It's a bit political. It's usually China biased. And it's also Russian intruding into whatever they put out there. I think that what you have is, you know, when I was at the United Nations, we had no better friend than Ukraine. They voted with us on everything. They were supportive of everything that we did, and they're pro-American. And I think what we know is that they're a democracy. And the reason that they are so careful in this war is they're trying to protect people and trying to prevent Ukrainians from dying. I think if there's any bullseye, you need to be looking at Russia. They're the ones that have invaded. They're the ones that are targeting schools. They're the ones that continue to have death that they don't care about. And I think that's the one we really need to be talking about. So I don't take any UN report too seriously.
On the subject of China, the Biden administration, as you know, recently sent 4 top officials to China to try to stabilize relations. You have said the Biden administration has the wrong approach because they're looking for win-win cooperation with China. You say, quote, they don't see us as a competitor, they see us as an enemy, unquote. Do you view China as an enemy?
China's been practically preparing for war with us for years. Yes, I view China as an enemy. And what's disappointing about what Biden has done is here you have China has bought up 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base. They bought our largest pork producer in the country. They continue to steal $600 billion of intellectual property. They're sending millions of dollars to our universities and stealing our research and spreading propaganda. 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese. So while Americans freaked out over the Chinese spy balloon, just imagine what's happening with all these mini spy balloons. They have killed more Americans than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined with their sending fentanyl over. I mean, how much more has to happen for Biden to realize you don't send cabinet members over to China to appease them? You start getting serious with China and say, we're not going to put up with it. They keep sending different cabinet officials over, Jake, and it's embarrassing. You sent Raimondo right after she got hacked. Her emails got hacked by the Chinese. You sent all of these cabinet officials over after a Chinese spy balloon went over our country. They are putting a Chinese spy base up on Cuba off the coast of Florida. And don't wait for the fact that they are going to be sending Chinese military troops there. What are we doing appeasing China? Instead, we should say you're not buying any more U.S. soil, and we're going to take back what you've already bought. We're going to go and make sure that we don't have Chinese infiltration in our universities, because our universities are going to have to pick between Chinese money or American money. We're going to end all normal trade relations with China until they stop killing Americans with fentanyl. And then we're going to build up our military, because China now has the strongest naval fleet in the world. They are developing hypersonic, artificial intelligence, cyber, space, neurostrike weapons, which will they're the biggest developer, which actually affects military commanders' thinking and populations of people. We need to make sure that we're serious about China, and they know that we're serious about them, not going and being nice to them and thinking that they're going to change.
On the subject of fentanyl, I just want to take a diversion for one quick second, because I've heard some of your colleagues bring up an interesting subject, which is, you're right, fentanyl is, it's obscene and horrific what's going on in terms of Americans being killed by this fentanyl crisis. Americans, kids who might take an herbal supplement that is not illegal and it has fentanyl in it and they die. A friend of mine, his nephew died that way. I've heard some of your colleagues talk about treating the drug dealers in Mexico as if they are a terrorist cell, and having the military, in cooperation with the Mexican government obviously, treat those Mexican drug dealers as a terrorist cell. What do you think of something like that?
Well, first of all, I think we deal with China first, because that's the originator, that's where it's coming from. But I actually do think we should send our special operations over to eliminate the cartels. We can't wait on Mexico anymore. We can't wait on any more Americans to die. We have to be aggressive on this, and we treat them like the terrorists that they are. Those cartels, they're trafficking people, they're trafficking drugs, and they're killing Americans, and we have to put an end to it.
So on the subject of China and Taiwan that you brought up a second ago, Vice President Harris was in Jakarta this week for a summit with Southeast Asian countries. President Biden has actually been criticized for being too direct on the subject of Taiwan, for abandoning what was called strategic ambiguity and saying directly that the U.S. would defend Taiwan militarily. What's your position? Let me ask you directly. If you were president, would the U.S., with President Haley, defend Taiwan militarily if China invaded?
We will defend Taiwan, and we will let China know there will be hell to pay if they do anything that hurts the Taiwanese or any of our allies. You know, a strong America prevents wars, Jake, and that's what we have to do. You can't appease them. I was very disappointed that Biden sent Kamala over there for the ASEAN summit. This is an important summit. It's 10 countries that are really focused on Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. And China's going to go bully these countries who are desperately trying to fight back. The Philippines, Malaysia, and others who want them to stop. By sending Kamala there, and not really showing that you've got seriousness on the fact that this Chinese aggression is hurting, when we know most of the world trade goes through that, that area of water. I mean, it's a mistake. And again, he says things, I appreciate it, words are fine, but actions matter. And if he would have gone and really made a strong point there, I think that would have been much more important than having Kamala go there and smile and take pictures.
So speaking of having a strong defense, speaking of having a strong Navy, Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville is currently, and for months, has been holding up more than 300 military promotions in the Senate, non-political positions, including the Chief of Staff of the Army, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs role is set to be vacant at the end of this month. I know you have criticized his decision. The military says this is hurting readiness. I know as a military spouse, you know, military spouses are really upset about this. Why is the Republican Party tolerating this?
There's a couple of things here, Jake. I mean, let's speak hard truths, right? First of all, Department of Defense never should have done this. I disagree with it, and I'll put an end to it as president.
You're talking about
the
reimbursement policy for travel, for abortion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because you have to do these things through Congress. We have 3 branches of government for a reason. You can't slip something in there like that and think that Congress is not going to be upset. So first, I'll put an end to that, and you'll handle it through the proper channels. Secondly, we don't need to be using military families as political pawns. That's a mistake. The military members and families, they sacrifice enough. They don't need to be a pawn in Congress. But look at the political games that continue to play. Chuck Schumer could still get this done if he went through and listed each member and had Congress vote on each member.
But Ambassador,
right
do
now,
you know what that would do?
That,
I mean, do you really want to have, I mean, the tradition is, generally speaking, that the Senate just votes unanimous consent for 300 people to be promoted. Oh, you think the military is political now? You really want to have the U.S. Senate voting on somebody being promoted to major, to lieutenant colonel, to admiral? I mean, every single person is going to have their social media posts scrubbed. You really want, like in the U.S. military, Bernie Sanders, Joe Manchin, like everybody's going to decide everybody's promotions? This is how we're going to do promotions from now on?
Well, if you're going to talk about tradition, shouldn't Department of Defense do things the right way so we're never in this mess to start with? Let's call it like we see it. Department of Defense started this. I'm not saying Senator Tuberville is right in doing this because I don't want to use them as pawns. But if you love our military, if you are so adamant about it, then go and make Congress, Republicans and Democrats, have to go through person by person. Do you honestly think they won't say, okay, this is ridiculous, let's put an end to it?
Well,
they will. But show your true grit by going out there and saying, fine, if y'all are going to play the military for the pawns like this, let's go member by member. Let's make them pay the price. Let's make them do their job. Let's make them suffer so that they know what they're doing to these military families. This isn't about making it convenient for Congress. This is about making sure you're doing right by members of the military. This is making sure you hold the Department of Defense accountable. Let's call that what it is, Jake, because right now everybody's saying, oh, but do you really want Congress doing this? You know what I want Congress to do is their job.
Right.
I want Congress to do their job. I want them to deal with inflation. I want them to deal with gas prices and groceries. I want them to deal with the lack of transparency in schools. I want them to deal with the fact that, yes, military members are being used as pawns and they need to make sure that these families don't suffer. I want them to do their job. And the majority of Americans see that government's not working for the people. It's the people working for government. And it's got to stop, including these political games that they play.
SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has confirmed a report in Walter Isaacson's new biography of him that last year Musk personally blocked access to his Starlink satellite network in Crimea in order to disrupt a major Ukrainian attack on the Russian Navy in Crimea. Do you think what Musk did was appropriate? And are you okay with a private citizen having so much power over a war?
Well, first of all, I don't know enough of the details about that to comment, but what I would say is if there's any sort of smoke, we should have transparency. We should be able to find out exactly what happened, who did it, when they did it, and why they did it. And then we should be able to take the appropriate action. The bottom line is we should always watch out for the national security of Americans and our allies. And if there was anything that came in the way of that, then we should address it. And if there's something there, then we should ask questions about it. But I think we need to look into it further.
Your campaign got some good news, some brand new polling from CNN suggesting you are far and away the strongest Republican candidate to take on Joe Biden. In fact, you're the only one in our polling who would decisively beat President Biden in a head-to-head race. Everyone else is within the margin of error. Still, on the Republican side, you and all the other Republicans trail Donald Trump in the primary. Why do you think the electability argument doesn't seem to be resonating more with Republican voters?
Well, I think the reason that it shows that I would beat Biden by 6 points is simple. I think the majority of Americans know we need a new generational leader, that we need to leave the negativity of the past behind us. The majority of Americans don't want to see a rematch between Trump and Biden. That's been very clear. And the majority of Americans think that we need to go with younger faces, younger voices, and we've got some work to do. They're tired of working for government. They want government to work for them. In terms of the primary, look, we're just getting started. Debate season is what kicks off the primary. We have made huge jumps in the primary polls so far, but this is the beginning of it. We've got quite a bit to go before we get to January. I'm going to work hard to earn every person's vote, whether it's Iowa, whether it's New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, or across this country. We have a country to save, and I'm determined to do it. It is time that we finally address the debt and the economy so that taxpayers don't feel like their money's being wasted. It's time to address the fact that we need to have transparency in the classrooms so that parents feel like they're in control of their children's education again. It's time that we deal with crime and bring law and order back to our country. And it's time that we secure our borders and start focusing on Americans instead of illegal immigrants that are coming in. And it's time that we finally have a strong national security where America is safe and we're strong abroad. That's what Americans want. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. And I think that they're going to continue to see that what we're saying is resonating.
Can the Republican Party credibly claim to be a law and order party with a nominee who is facing 91 felony counts?
Well, Jake, I'll tell you this. I was at the United Nations, and I saw many countries who would say someone was a criminal before they were tried. This is America. We don't do that. You're not convicted until you've had the opportunity to defend yourself. So let's let Donald Trump defend himself. Let's see what happens. And if he is convicted, then the American people will deal with it then. But let's have the blessings that we have in America, which is everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Let's let the evidence play out. Let's let the lawyers do their thing, and let's see what Donald Trump does, and then we can make a decision. But I have faith in the American people. I trust them, and I trust what will happen will be the right thing for our country.
One of President Biden's biggest achievements he's touting on the campaign trail is a $35 price cap on insulin for American seniors on Medicare. Some companies have extended that price, $35, to all their patients. As president, would you keep that $35 price cap on insulin, or would you try to reverse it?
I think what Biden did was a Band-Aid. Do we need to do something about health care? Absolutely. My dad just got out of the hospital. I know the cost, but the way we deal with it is we need to start exposing the insurance companies, the hospitals, the doctors, the PBMs, the pharmaceutical companies, make them all transparent. Why should anyone go to the hospital and have an insurance company in a hospital negotiate the cost for the patient with the patient not having anything involved? Why are drugs so expensive? Why the pharmaceutical companies get to decide this with government and not have patients at the table? Why don't we have more competition and transparency in this? When I am president, we will go through and expose all of that. If we just dealt with the insurance companies alone, we would cut health care in half. So yes, it's great when you can say we're going to lower the cost of these drugs because people cannot afford them, but it's a Band-Aid. It's not fixing the real problem. Let's do the hard work and fix the fact that we are the best country in the world with the most expensive health care, and regular, normal Americans can't afford it. You know, when my mom went to the hospital, they gave her 2 Tylenol. She said, I don't need it. They said, well, honey, you might as well take it because you're going to pay for it anyway. That's ludicrous. We need to break the system and refix it, not just keep putting Band-Aids over it, because it's just leaving more and more Americans suffering and unavailable to be able to afford their health care.
Your 2024 competitor, Vivek Ramaswamy, just recently said he would deport the children of undocumented immigrants who were born in the United States, children born in the United States, although those kids have been widely considered to have birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. What do you think? Do you think children born in the United States have birthright citizenship, or do you think they should be deported?
I think that conversation is putting the cart before the horse. What we need to do is go to Congress and say, do your job. They need to do immigration reform. First of all, we need to secure the border, stop anyone from coming over, and make sure that we do that by stopping catch and release, go to catch and deport, defund sanctuary cities, make sure that we go back to the Remain in Mexico plan, because nobody wants to remain in Mexico, and put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents and let them do their job. When it comes to legal immigration, Congress needs to get in a room and fix this. We need to go and deal with the fact that we shouldn't be bringing people into our country based on quotas. What about if we brought people into our country based on merit, where you looked and said, what do we need in our economy? What companies need workers? What jobs are we not able to fill? If you brought them in based on that, all of a sudden you're building our economy. You're helping America. You're not bringing in illegals who are coming in and using our system and that taxpayers are paying for. Let's do it the right way. The fact that you want to talk about children of illegal immigrants, that's the cart before the horse. Why don't we talk about legal immigration, reforming it, stopping the border, and then talk about what we're going to do to deal with the children of illegal immigrants?
One last thing before we go. There are a lot of candidates who are still in the race who are routinely polling in the very, very low single digits. As somebody not there, a little bit higher, do you think it's time for the field to consolidate a little bit? Should some of the other candidates drop out?
Well, I think we've seen the field consolidate some. You know, we started with 12. I think 8 ended up on the debate stage. The criteria will go up for the September 27th debate. I think the field will wind down a little bit more. And so as this goes on, I think we're going to see it continue to get smaller and smaller. This isn't 2016 where we had 17 people on the stage. I'm thinking that we're going to have 6 when it comes to the next debate stage, and we'll continue to wind it down. And so I'm comfortable with the process taking place the way that it is, and I think that the American people will start to kind of force this on their own, and we'll end up with the right nominee. I expect to be that nominee. I expect to be the president, and I expect to get our country back on track.
Is South Carolina a must-win for you think?
I think Iowa and New Hampshire are states that we need to do well in. I think I needed to have a strong showing in Iowa, a strong showing in New Hampshire, and I think if I do both of those, I think the people of South Carolina will show me the grace that they've shown me before. We had an event in North Charleston just a couple of days ago. We had 1,000 people. The week before that, we were in Indian Land, South Carolina. We had 1,000 people there, several hundred in Boiling Springs. So South Carolinians have been good to me. They know I work, they know I fight for them, and they know at the end of the day, I produce results. And so I expect that they will continue to want me to do that for them as we go into the presidential part of taking the lead in this country.
Ambassador Haley, always good to see you. Thanks so much. Come back soon.
Thanks so much, Jake.